Hey, Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Jam-packed, full show for you today. Jon Stinchcomb stops by. We'll talk about what Kirby Smart had to say about the win against Kentucky. We'll talk about what Georgia showed and how this game against the Wildcats fits into a larger picture around college football where it seems like there's as much chaos as there's ever been. And somehow, some way, just finding a way to survive, finding a way to advance, and stay away from the wildness that seems to be plaguing some other programs. A lot of top-ranked teams to begin the season now no longer ranked at all. Georgia, for the most part, hoping to avoid some of that. How can they continue to do that with a massive road game at Auburn on a deck for the upcoming weekend? We are all over all of that today, and we're glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So throughout the time on our show today, we're going to talk about what, if anything, we learned from Georgia's win against Kentucky. It was nice to see Georgia make it look mostly easy. Obviously, the nature of the competition factors into that. We're not going to pretend that it doesn't. So during our time today, we're going to talk about what the key takeaways were from that particular game. If you don't mind, though, I want to begin with this. I thought that maybe the single most interesting thing we heard from Kirby Smart after the game related to some of the things that he had to say about Gunner Stockton. We've told you before that we think for all the times in which you hear from Kirby Smart throughout the week, it's the post-game press conference when the adrenaline of the game is still a little juiced up within you, that Kirby is oftentimes more interesting, more off the cuff, just a little more shooting from the hip in a post-game press conference than he is any other time. And if you want some insight into his actual thoughts, if you want his unfettered analysis of his own team, you are far more likely to get that from a post-game press conference than you are from one of the Monday, or if he speaks some other time, just because he's going to be more guarded in those situations. And I think Saturday is a perfect example of this. And I think we ought to lean in on this a bit more. Gunner Stockton, I think, was fine on Saturday. Obviously had 2 rushing touchdowns. That was a pretty big deal, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But Stockton did throw his first interception of the season. And I think in speaking about that interception and what he saw from Gunner on that, and what he wants to see Gunner overall, I think from Kirby Smart, you get a really good snapshot of what they still want to see from their quarterback and how close Gunner is coming to meeting the expectations that the Georgia coaches have for him. I think this is really interesting. I think it's honest and it's thorough. I think this is solid analysis from Kirby Smart, who doesn't always share this stuff with us, but in this particular moment, after Gunner Stockton threw an interception, I think that Kirby Smart laid it out for all of us to understand and for all of us to hear exactly what he thinks the job of a quarterback is supposed to be. This is really good. It's worth starting with, and it sets the stage for the rest of the season for Georgia. Kirby from Saturday after Gunner threw his first pick.
Well, I would say he had the most growth today in terms of downfield throws, layered throws, stepping up in the pocket. Still has some more to do. He only had his first pick. I mean, it's like it's going to happen. You know, it's like it didn't faze him. He knows he wish he had that one back, but you know, you can't throw a pick unless you take some risk, and you can't make plays unless you take some risk. And he's growing out of the risk aversion and moving towards, can I make calculated decisions that are the right ones and use the skill set of the players we have.
Once again, I think that's incredibly interesting from Kirby Smart for a couple of reasons. A, I'm going to take the risk of reading between the lines on that a little bit. And I think that if you listen closely to Kirby Smart there, the suggestion that you get is that maybe thus far this season, while Gunner's mostly been fine, maybe Georgia still feels like Gunner can do a lot more than he has done, that there's more that Gunner can give over to the Georgia offense than he's given. I think he's given a lot. And as I said, I think he's been certainly more successful than not. I just think that's the simple analysis of that. But there may be a higher level of achievement, a higher ceiling, more potential to unlock for Gunner than what he's shown thus far. And in a roundabout way, those words from Kirby Smart, I think, stand as a challenge to be able to do that. And when you talk about exactly what that would look like, the way in which Kirby shrugs off the interception, I think it gives us a better understanding of this, in that what Kirby's essentially telling you there, and I think this is true for Gunner Stockton, I think it's true for Josh Allen in the NFL or high school quarterback or wherever else, this just may be true for quarterbacks in general, that what you do is more important than what you don't do. What I mean by that is that we think of quarterbacks sometimes as, oh, you got to avoid mistakes. And, the old school coaches sometimes used to say, hey, let's end every possession with a kick. It's either a PAT, a field goal try, or a punt. In other words, we don't want interceptions. We don't want turnovers. And oftentimes you push these quarterbacks into this box of be a game manager, don't make mistakes, avoid bad throws, avoid bad interceptions. And of course, to a certain extent, that's the quarterback's job. But if you evaluate quarterbacks only by what they don't do, in other words, do they avoid turnovers, then you're missing a big picture of what quarterbacks are supposed to do, which is make big throws and make big plays. And honestly, Georgia as a team can't get to where it wants to go without Gunner Stockton making some big plays. And the only way, and even if we've never played quarterback before, we all, I think, have some intuitive understanding of this. The only way you can make the throws you need to make and give your team the chance you need to give them is if you do live free and easy and learn to tolerate just a little bit of risk. Kirby says there, hey, take some risk, take some chances. We want you to make the throw. If you see it, we want you to let it rip. If you notice it, trust yourself to make it happen. I do think that is what Kirby Smart is challenging Gunner Stockton to do, and using the event of an interception to say, I'm not that worried about that. We can survive that. But we won't be as good as we can be unless you trust yourself to do what your skill set can allow you to do during a game. And in that particular statement, Smart uses risk averse, maybe too risk averse to begin the season. As Gunner is growing and getting better, is he becoming less risk averse with the throws that he's willing to make and the times that he's willing to cut up the field and run? Well, later on in that same press conference on Saturday, Smart talked more about if Gunner really is growing to the point where, especially when it comes to when he just turn it loose and take off and run, that he's starting to trust himself on that a bit more. Here's Kirby Smart again.
I don't think it was a hurdle for him. He wasn't risk averse. He was at times making decisions on, okay, this guy, that guy, what coverage it was, what am I doing with the ball. There was times that it was like, I'm going to go run it with my legs, and then there was times that he had to because we didn't protect it well. I mean, go back to the early games. There were some times in there that the protection broke down on him, and as protection has improved, his confidence has improved. It's never going to be perfect. You're never going to block them all. You're never going to win all your one-on-one blocks. They got good twitchy guys, but he gives us the element of when it does break down. Today, we've been talking about off-schedule plays. He gets an off-schedule touchdown run, I think, on a scramble, and then he gets an off-schedule hold on Dillon Bell that really it would have been maybe a touchdown. The guy doesn't hold him. So, teams have to account for what he can do with his legs, and that helps us.
Are y'all noticing this? I hope you are. I feel like you're getting really solid, candid analysis from Kirby Smart in a way that he doesn't really owe it to us. I mean, if he wanted to just mumble a few words and move on, for the most part, he'd get away with that. That'd be fine. He's actually giving us more here than he necessarily has to, and it's to our benefit to hear Kirby break down Gunner Stockton the way that he is, of what they want to see him do, how close he's coming to achieve that, and maybe sometimes in the past, as he says there, hey, some of the decisions that Stockton may have made in some early season games, maybe that was based on the fact that at one point in time, Georgia really wasn't protecting Gunner very well, or at least there were some protection breakdowns. Seemed like the offensive line might be getting a little bit better. We'll ask Jon Stinchcomb about that later on. But this is really good analysis, I think, from Kirby Smart, who obviously we would know has the ability to analyze it well, but he doesn't always share with us what his analysis is. But in this particular case, that's what he's doing. And as Kirby also says, hey, the thing that I loved on Saturday was the Gunner's legs were back. And I do think it's a little bit weird that, okay, well, Gunner's the leading rusher in the game against Marshall, doesn't really run it at all against Austin Peay. runs very little against Alabama, 2 rushing touchdowns in the first quarter against Kentucky. I would like to see that stabilize at some point. I do think that the Georgia offense, to be as good as it can be, I do think it's got to include a lot from Gunner on the ground. I hope that what we saw against Kentucky does replicate itself more in the weeks to come, including at Auburn on Saturday. But Gunner clearly adds an extra dimension to the Georgia offense when he chooses to run. He's also got to be careful, not put himself in harm's way. One of the Gunner's best and worst traits is he's not afraid of contact, which shows how tough he is, but it also is one of those things where you just can't take a million hits without paying the price for that. And to hear one more from Kirby on Gunner, he talked about the fact that, as Gunner's doing what he's doing, he is taking some big blows here and there. And over the course of the time, that does mount and compounds and takes its toll on him a bit. Here's Kirby Smart one more time on this topic.
He's beat up. He's beat up, and it's not the design runs getting him. He did a great job. He slid. He made a play today, converted a first down. It's some of it's shots he's taken through the year. It's protection. It's him putting his shoulder down and running hard. But he had some really big conversions that his legs allowed us to have, which those are really frustrating for defenses. But he's got to take care of his body, and we got to help him take care of himself.
I think the point about how frustrating it is for a defense when you feel like you've got everything covered, but then the quarterback, not even a design run, just decides, hey, I see a lane to run through. I'm just going to go get some positive yards. I'm going to convert the first down if it happens to be third down. I think that's just demoralizing for a defense. And frankly, I'm glad that Georgia has that element with what Gunner Stockton's able to provide. And the truth is, I think he's close to being what Georgia needs for him to be. I do think there's room for improvement, but I think he's close. I know there was, and I'll show you this on the screen, there was some stats that got some attention over the weekend. Some of y'all know who Athens Steve is on X, comparing, and I guess that guy named Bucko did this first on 3, comparing Gunner Stockton to Carson Beck. And this is not about relitigating the Beck era. It's just that Carson right now is probably getting more attention than any quarterback in America. But what Athens Steve put on X is that both these guys have now played 3 Power 4 teams, a ranked home game, a ranked road game, and a non-ranked home game. And you look at the overall numbers, it's 630 passing yards for Stockton. It's 606 passing yards for Beck. It's a 68.9 completion percentage for Stockton, a 65.5 point completion for Beck, 6 touchdowns to a 1 pick in those games for Beck, 4 touchdowns and a pick for those games for Stockton. Stockton's also giving the dimension with his legs, 24 carries, 108 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Now, it's not my intention to tell you that, Gunner Stockton's having a better year than Carson Beck. But I do think if those stats mean anything to you, maybe they mean this, that Stockton may be having a better season thus far than some folks possibly realize. And more important than that, he may have a higher ceiling for the rest of the season than he's been given credit for too. But Kirby Smart lays out in clear terms what the blueprint is for how he achieves that. You got to be willing to take some risk. You can't be afraid of the interception. You threw it on Saturday. Georgia didn't wilt. Team withstood it and got right back to work. And I do think that's the way it's got to be going forward, that it can't just be about avoiding mistakes. It's also got to be about cultivating some big plays and making some stuff happen too. And maybe now that Gunner's got some experience under his belt here in the first, 5 games of the regular season, maybe he's ready to do more of that as the season progresses, including at Auburn on Saturday. Now, let me shift gears to this here for a moment. One of the most fun things that we saw from Saturday was what might be, not quite breakout, because he's obviously done things in a Georgia uniform before, but at least for this season, Dillon Bell broke out for the 2025 season in a way that he has not at any point in time this year. The big catch, 2 rushing touchdowns. I would say creative in how those were put on, kind of put together and put on display. And you were reminded in the midst of all of this about what kind of weapon that Georgia potentially has when it comes to Dillon Bell. I told you a moment ago, as it relates to Gunner Stockton, I like the Georgia offense when Stockton runs. I like the Georgia offense when you get these creative running plays for guys like Dillon Bell too. I think that Georgia right now probably has a higher ceiling offensively than it does defensively. I think overall Georgia runs it better than it throws it. These creative runs, especially the likes of which the Dillon Bell provides, that just seems to be Georgia at its best. And credit to Dillon, who I guess has been waiting for his moment, hasn't quite come this season. But boy, it came on Saturday. He capitalized on it in a big way, and he was more than happy to tell you just how happy he was about that when the game is done. This is what Dillon Bell said, justifiably so, after the game on Saturday evening. Here's Dillon Bell.
I feel like the type of team we have, when the receiving core we have, anybody can have a big day, you know. It's just when the opportunity comes, you just got to present yourself and do what you do. It was very warming for my heart for that to happen, you know. It's been a long time coming. I'm just happy that was the result.
Good for him. Long time coming. I'm happy that he's happy. I think he deserves to be happy. I think that's a great thing to be able to see. And as Dillon said, there are a lot of guys in that receiver room with him, or playmakers in the offense in general, when you start thinking about all the different positions, that are ready for their moment. They want their number to be called, but it's about being ready to capitalize on the moment if your moment does come up. And that's what Dillon Bell was able to do on Saturday. And when Kirby Smart had his chance to talk about Dillon Bell and all of this, one of the things that he mentioned was, as Dillon was waiting for that moment, how patient he was and how much Kirby thinks that embodies what makes Georgia a special football team, too. This is Kirby Smart.
Yeah, so excited for him. Probably most proud of the catch he had over on our sideline. The two other plays were almost walk-ins. They were well blocked. It probably wasn't about what he did. It was more about what the other 10 people did. But Dillon has been very selfless since he's been here. He has not had many opportunities this year to touch the ball and make plays, and he has not complained one bit. And he continues to work, and I appreciate who Dillon Bell is, and I really appreciate all those wideouts, because it's a good group that has stayed the course, and they understand who they are.
I like that selflessness that Kirby Smart describes from Dillon Bell. I think that's a good attribute for the Georgia team to have. I'll also tell you this, my hope is that what we saw from Dillon on Saturday is not just a one-off of, oh, well, this happened to work against Kentucky, so therefore we did it. Other games we're doing something different. Georgia's got a lot of mouths to feed, a lot of playmakers who have their chance. But as I said, I think that Georgia is interesting on the ground. Chauncey Bowen's traditional running plays, creative stuff they've done earlier in the year with Dwight Phillips, creative stuff with, remember Nate Frazier, the overtime run against Tennessee, creative stuff with Dillon Bell there, even some of the stuff with Gunner Stockton. Georgia's creative running plays are the best part of this offense here at the moment. And for Georgia to be as good as a team as it needs to be, I think that needs to be the forefront of the Georgia identity. So Dillon Bell was patient waiting for his moment. His moment came on Saturday. Frankly, I hope there's a lot more of that, because some of what Georgia showed against Kentucky, as the Dogs step back into play against better competition moving forward, you would hope that some of that replicates itself. And if it does, then this is a Georgia team that still has a chance to be very much a contender as the thick of the SEC season starts to take shape. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We're happy that you're with us live on video, 10 a.m., of course, on demand on video after that. Radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 Ref, podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really appreciate you being a part of our show today, and super thankful to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia who make it all possible for you there as well. You know, it's one of those drizzly fall Sunday feeling days yesterday where it's almost like being in like New England or, you know, England or somewhere like that, where it's just really soupy and drizzly. And boy, you know, if you've got improperly fitted windows or windows that are beyond their shelf life and they just need to be replaced, then all of that draftiness and moisture and all the stuff from the outside, that's coming inside. You're going to feel that. It doesn't feel good when you're walking through parts of your house and it just feels drafty or cold or damp. You don't want that feeling. Well, that's where I think properly fitted, super efficient, incredibly technologically advanced windows, like what Pella is famous for. That's why it's time for you to have a conversation with one of the Pella experts and talk about that big upgrade. Also, it's a great way to save money in your energy bills here, too. Hot weather time of year, you're spending a bunch on AC. You move towards the colder weather time of the year where all of a sudden it's that heating system that's cranked up. Well, the money you spend for the energy in your house, you want it to stay right where it is, and you don't want those units having to work any harder than they need to. So that's what Pella is all about. I want you to find them online. It's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. That's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call, 678-638-1429. 678-638-1429. $29.29. Find out why Pella Window and Door of Georgia has been such a trusted resource for so many folks in our audience for such a long time. And take advantage of great savings opportunities right now. You can get 50% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 48 months. So a couple of great options there on that. Save money on your utility bills, keep that cold air out, and just enjoy these awesome windows that are worth putting your hands on. You got loud roads outside, busy streets, trucks, things like that. Reduce the noise. Just make everything on the inside of your house feel good. You'd be surprised to know what a Pella window can do for you. So talk to one of those Pella experts. They'll tell you more about that today. Now, speaking of experts, we're going to talk to one of our experts, Jon Stinchcomb, here coming up in a moment. That's going to be a great conversation. Also, before we do that, let me remind you, you've got the final day is today to get in on our Cercheros Ultimate Game Day Party giveaway. So someone's going to win a $200 gift card to Cercheros to fund your watch party, tailgate party, whatever it is, getting some friends together to enjoy the fresh mix of Cercheros. We want you to be a winner on this, but your chance to win, your last day to register is today. So go to DawgNation.com/tailgate. You can get in on that. DawgNation.com/tailgate. $200 gift card could be yours, and you can enjoy what I've enjoyed. When you go through the line there, they'll grill your veggies fresh for you. That's the great care they take to make sure that every single meal tastes delicious. And the same thing you do when you stop in one of the 40-plus locations they have across the state of Georgia and around the South. Well, they'll do that for you for your game day watch party and your tailgate party, too. And you may find that out in style as a lucky winner. But today is the last day to get in on that. So go to DawgNation.com/tailgate for your chance. That is DawgNation.com/tailgate for your chance on that. All right, before we get Jon Stinchcomb, let's go around the Dawghouse today, poured by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And let me say this real quick. I think for a while this season, we have been looking to figure out what's the prevailing narrative going to be. Does this season have a storyline? Well, I think now we do have some degree of storyline, and that is well-known brands with big expectations to begin the season have arguably revealed themselves to be frauds. The top two teams from the preseason AP poll are now unranked. Clemson, the number 4 team from the preseason AP poll, they've been unranked for a while. So 3 of the top 4 teams from the preseason poll to begin the season are now unranked because Penn State was embarrassed losing to lowly UCLA. Texas, which we'll talk more about later on, lost at Florida. And, Clemson's lost a couple of games here. That all of a sudden, a lot of these teams that, boy, this was supposed to be their year, as it turns out, no, that's not quite the case at all. And in addition to that, the teams that have looked good, there's no guarantee they're going to be able to maintain that level of success. In fact, let me show you this on the screen here from Bill Conley, who does the SP Plus for ESPN. For all the teams that have been dominant to begin the season, or at least close to dominant as we have, none of them have, at least according to Conley's numbers, a very high chance of going undefeated for the season. Texas Tech, just 36.3%. Ohio State, just 32.9%. Oregon, just 26.2%. Miami, despite the fact that Miami doesn't really play big games yet, or should say for a while after beating Florida State on Saturday, but Miami's chance of going 12-0, just 25.2%. Ole Miss, that Georgia's going to face in a couple of weeks, just an 8.6% chance of going undefeated. Texas A&M, which is riding high right now, just a 3.6% chance of going undefeated. And on you go here, that we've already seen highly ranked teams, big expectations, they've fallen flat. Bill Conley's numbers say percentage chance, even the current undefeated teams are far more likely to lose than not before the season comes to an end. And so in the midst of all of this, you've got Georgia. And when you see the context here, Georgia's not been perfect. Wasn't perfect in its loss last week to Alabama. It hasn't been perfect in its wins at Tennessee, Kentucky on Saturday. There is legitimate reason for concern for UGA, and I don't fault any Georgia fan who's paid attention to some of that. But I do think when you watch what's happening to some of the other teams around Georgia, I think the mission for Georgia becomes a little easier to understand. It's simply about just finding a way to last a little longer. Can you hang around for just a little longer? Can you, to use an overused phrase, can you survive and advance? And can you keep getting a little bit better as you do? Well, Kirby Smart talked about that on Saturday, the fact that even after the game against Alabama, in which obviously DawgNation was dejected, this is the team potentially in the midst of improvement. If they can hang around long enough, maybe that improvement can pay out before the season is done. This is Kirby Smart.
I wasn't shocked at all by the response to the team. I mean, I expected it. I mean, to be honest with you, I was proud of the way they played in the Alabama game. And I told them that we got a good football team. I mean, it didn't always go our way. We did a lot of good things in that game, and if we continue to get better, then we'll be where we need to be. And if we don't get better, then we won't. And there's only so many teams that are going to keep getting better.
It's true. It's true. Teams are eliminating themselves from playoff contention. Of those who are still alive, the needed improvement to take the next step, not every team's capable of making it. And by the way, maybe this Georgia team will prove not to be capable of making it. But for now, they may be just getting just a little bit better. Offensive line, maybe we'll ask Jon Stinchcomb about that in a moment. Other areas, maybe. Do they still need a lot of improvement? Maybe especially on defense? Arguably that's the case. But when you see the carnage around you of number one team, number two team, no longer ranked, Clemson falling apart, other teams, losses coming, SEC's wide open, just find a way to hang around. Find a way to give yourself a chance. And that may be what Saturday against Kentucky was all about. Now, before I bring on Jon Stinchcomb, let me also do two other things here real quick. We'll talk offensive line with John. We always do. Obviously, the big story involving the Georgia offensive line on Saturday is the fact that early in this game, Monroe Freeling gets banged up. He has to leave. And, boy, his status, certainly for the game against Auburn, a total unknown right now. But his absence would be a big deal. What can Kirby tell us about that injury? This is what he said about Freeling's status, what he knew about it, at least at the time, on Saturday.
Ankle. Don't know how bad or severe it was. It was an ankle. He retaped, tried to put pressure on it, couldn't. Bo practiced all week at right and had to go at left. Didn't take many reps there. Micah's dealing with a hamstring pull from week before. He was able to go without. He didn't give me any reps in practice, and then his shoulder slipped out, which he's dealing with, and he came back. But I mean, they're a mass unit. I mean, it's tough sledding. It's the dangest thing I've ever seen with the offensive line in terms of, never played with two freshmen, never played with five guys, and having to roll guys. It's been really tough.
So, obviously, injuries are a concern, and Georgia's had a hard time keeping the five guys it wants in the field healthy, no doubt about that. You are thankful for depth. It does seem like Bo Hughley came in, did some good things for Georgia after mostly being a right tackle, thrust into duty there at the left tackle spot, and for the moment, this sounds like a player that Georgia's pretty lucky to have. Kirby was certainly effusive in his praise of Hughley after the game. This is what he said.
He's just a competitor, man. That guy loves football. He should be the poster child for fire, passion, and energy. He never stops cheering. He's in the halftime geeking people up. Like he loves football. He plays hard. He loves Georgia. He struggles to keep his weight up sometimes, but you love the way the guy plays, and I appreciate his competitive toughness.
Yeah, I mean, that's a guy that right now you got to have a guy like that can step in and provide some value for you when you've had a hard time keeping offensive tackles healthy and injuries all over the place. Georgia's mostly holding it together, and maybe based on some of what we've seen, maybe the offensive line getting a little better in the process here too. Jon Stinchcomb's the opinion that matters on that. We'll let him tell us about that in a moment. For now, though, let me remind you, that's Around the Dawghouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And I'll tell you, I continue to love these Fansville commercials. I think they're really funny. The one that they got out now where Jerry Jones is in it, and he talks about being in Pro Town where they play football on Sundays around here. They're just funny. They're obviously written by football fans, college football fans in particular, and that's what Dr. Pepper is. It's always been deeply connected to college football, deeply connected with us here at DawgNation. We love it. We're proud of our association with them, and we think that you get the most out of your game days. Ought to be enjoying the rich, one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper there as well. So as you're at your local Kroger, wherever you're doing your grocery shopping, pick up some Dr. Pepper and make it a part of your game day experience. And check out those Fansville commercials all season long. Okay, so craziness around college football, big, highly ranked teams losing left and right. We'll talk about that before we're done, how that impacts Georgia. But for now, is the offensive line getting better? And do the injuries run the risk of stopping that improvement if it is taking place? Let's cover that and more with Jon Stinchcomb here right now. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
All right, good stuff. Always happy to have Jon Stinchcomb here on a Monday. John, we've done a lot of offensive line talking this season. Of course, it would make sense. Your expertise. It's also a critical part of any football team. Let me start with the injury part of this. Seems like, the best that I can tell, oftentimes it's one of those things where, hey, sometimes no news is good news. We won't talk much about Monroe Freeling. That's probably, a pretty good sign for how he was playing. Seems like this injury, if I had to guess, not being a doctor, probably keeps him out of the Auburn game, at least would certainly cast his availability into doubt. How big of a deal do you think Freeling's injury is for Georgia right now?
I think that's been the storyline of the season offensively, is just trying to figure out who the right five is going to be each Saturday, and that continues. I think, you saw Monroe on the sideline trying to figure out whether he can get back in the game. I think that's a promising sign. It didn't seem like it's one of those high ankle sprains that everyone talks about that, you get tightrope surgery and you're out for a month plus. This seems to be your garden variety, if you will, sprained ankle. And I think that's encouraging because this offensive line needs some continuity and some consistency. I think the ability for Gaston to, during that bye week, kind of claim that right tackle spot allowed things to settle a little bit, allowed Bo Hughley to become that third tackle. You heard Coach Smart say he didn't get a ton of reps at left, but when he's in the game, he's not losing because of his ability. And I think that's an encouraging sign. I think this is a group that continues to get better, and they need to get better. It's not a finished product. It's you see some of the warts that exist, and part of it is just the maturation of a group that is coming together. But having consistency is important. When you hear that the left side, which is Micah Morris and Monroe Freeling, that's kind of been the anchor point for this offensive line. And with them dealing with some injuries, it puts a group that's been under a heck of a lot of scrutiny, even more so in the spotlight. So having those guys healthy is important. But again, that's the wear and tear that exists when you go through the rough slate of games in a 12-game season like Georgia faces on a year-in, year-out basis.
So this is hardly astute analysis. It's just my sort of knee-jerk reaction. To me, it seems like every ankle injury is always worse than it's initially feared. And over the course of time, they don't really get better. They get worse because there's a little bit of an adrenaline in the immediate moment when it happens. But the more you have a chance to sort of sit and think about it, the more you realize, boy, this really hurts. That's just sort of my analysis of ankle injuries. They're almost always worse than you realize, and they get actually worse over time as opposed to better. As someone who's probably dealt with his share of ankles over the course of time, how do you view just the nature of the ankle injury? And as you said, you want to stay away from the high ankle because it just seems like that's about as, I don't know, those things just seem to linger forever. But, just the nature of ankle injuries for an offensive tackle overall.
Yeah, I think there's two categories, right? The high ankle sprain, which certainly sets you down for an extended period of time, and then your standard traditional ankle sprain, and they can linger, but we're not out making route cuts like a wide receiver or change of direction like a defensive back. So for an offensive lineman, I think they're a little more, you can deal with them a little better from the offensive line perspective. Obviously, there is a certain threshold that you need to reach in movement ability, and there is some change of direction that you have to be able to execute. And I think sometimes players feel the pressure to get back out there if there's not someone that you feel confident in taking your place. And it's a sense of pride of, I don't want to let my team down. And I think what Bo Hughley has done is kind of earned the respect of his teammates that, if you're not capable and, not 100%, nobody's 100% right now. I don't think that's the threshold or the bar that you need to clear. But if you're not capable of playing at a high enough level, then you got to be able to trust the next man up. And for Monroe, it's where is he? And today's Monday. You don't have to be there on today.
Yeah.
But as you get towards the end of the week, you need to figure out whether or not he's going to be ready to go. And I'm sure in the process, you're going to get Bo as ready as possible if he is the guy that is going to have to take the field at left tackle come Saturday. Now, here's the good news, BA. It's, this isn't SEC championship level competition that you're facing. And I want to beat Auburn as much as the next guy, probably more. But they are not the world beaters that you're going to face later in the season and postseason. So for Monroe, I think that's part of the equation too, is if I can go play and play at a high level, then I'm going to do that. But if you're borderline, I think there's an opportunity to trust the guy behind you that he can get in there and play well.
Left guard's a little banged up too in the case of Micah Morris, but John, how tough is he? I mean, like, he's got this great barroom brawler kind of mystique to him anyway. Just tough as nails, and I mean that super complimentary. Couple of different injuries probably, unfortunately, have to be in and out a bit, but always back in and just mauling people when he's in there. He's a veteran presence. He dates back to the national championship era for this team. I'm super thankful to have him here. I know he's going through it a bit here too, but man, they don't make him much tougher than Micah Morris, I don't think.
What a great example, BA, of a guy who doesn't have to be 100% to still get out there and play at a high enough level that you kind of forget that he's in the lineup, which is a good thing for an offensive line. I mean, he's never going to be the teach tape for technique. He relies on his mass and just super strength, because you watch him play and he's able to do some things that most guys, if they were in his position, would have to pay the consequences. But hearing Coach Smart say that he's dealing with a hamstring injury, I think we all saw him come off the field with a dropped shoulder, and you're going, that doesn't look good. And a series later, he's back on the field. I think that's the kind of toughness that a lot of fans can appreciate and respect. And, in today's age, it seems like there's a number of players that they're like Lamborghinis and Ferraris, that if it's 100%, it looks good. And if it's anything less, then they're going to be in the garage getting tuned up because they're not willing to go out there. And Micah is a guy, a prime example of he's going to put it on the line for his team and get out there even when he's not 100%, and not to the detriment of the guys he's playing with, but to their benefit, that he's willing to be tough and grimy and gritted out. And, for a former offensive lineman, we've got a lot of respect for a guy like that doesn't have to be 100%, still puts it on the line, sacrifices himself, and gives it up for his teammates.
Okay, so I want to find out what you feel like we learned, if anything, about Georgia against Kentucky. The statement that I made coming off the game is I think for now, Georgia has a higher ceiling on offense than it does on defense. And Georgia's running game and the creative runs where you get Dillon Bell involved, Gunner Stockton involved, want to see Dwight Phillips back in on this, traditional stuff also including, the likes of Chauncey Bowens and, Nate Frazier maybe getting back on track now. That Georgia, I think, is better on offense than on defense. I think it runs it better than it throws it. And I think that is the Georgia identity right now. And I do think it's a lesser level of competition than Georgia will mostly face the rest of the season. But for me, that's what I feel like I had confirmed against Kentucky. What do you, if anything, feel like we learned against Kentucky?
I think that's a great analysis. I look at it and you go, I think we're starting to create a real identity in the run game, that there's some creativity there, but we also know what we do well. And pulling linemen, a lot of man schemes, that has been effective and efficient. I think that's another piece is, it's not just big runs, and we've had a lot of those, more so than we have in years past. And you look at the averages and just normal down and distance, the ability for Georgia to move the ball in the run game has certainly been a storyline. Sticking on the offensive side of the ball, I think we're still trying to create opportunities in the pass game. And a huge piece of that, we just talked about offensive line. Well, we're trying to take shots, but Gunner is not throwing from a perfectly clean pocket. And you look at the plays, you go back and watch film on Sunday of what happened the day before, and you're going, well, here we're trying to dial it up, but there's a defender in Gunner's face, and he's trying to create. And that's a problem right now. So the good news is that the running game. The bad news is we still haven't been able to create a consistent identity in the air. And that luckily, there's still opportunity to get better, and they need to. Now, I think the bigger storyline is the defense, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, for a number of reasons at both the front end and the back end, I think our linebackers are kind of carrying the water right now, but we're not creating a lot of pass rush. We're not playing clean football on the back end. There's a lot of mistakes and lack of plays on the ball given the opportunity. So, if anything, I think that's kind of the limiting factor right now for this Georgia team is oddly and uniquely from years past, it's the defense that's kind of that limiting factor.
How much improvement do you think that can show? How much better can that get? Because I have to admit that when I think about what I hope are Georgia's opportunity to achieve some in-season goals, things like that, I'm now calibrating in a probably not going to be a great defense, that you're going to have to work around some of the stuff related to the defense, just speaking matter-of-factly. What do you think the threshold for improvement for this Georgia defense is?
Well, I think Coach Smart hits on it when he's talking about this team that we have to get better. And there's a lot of young players that have high ceilings. Robinson, DeMello, great examples of guys on the back end that have the skill set that just need to continue to get better as players, as football players on the field, rep after rep and consistency. Defensive backs, offensive line, that's how you're rated. That's how you're evaluated is don't show me the one splashy play. Show me you're consistently winning. And right now, I think we're getting it in fits and spurts. Defensive line wise, edge rusher wise, I think Q Johnson is a guy that continues to get better. I think he's really good against the run. I think a lot of our edge players are much more comfortable trying to blunt a pulling guard more so than win a one-on-one pass rush. So I think a combination of things will need to come into effect. And that is being able to create a scheme week in and week out that leans in on some of these players' strengths and kind of hides their weaknesses, because we certainly have some. And then just players getting better, that each week is an opportunity to take one step forward. And this is a young team. I think that we're now realizing what Coach Smart was saying at the beginning of the year. When you look at this roster and say, we've got so many guys that are young, that have been here for one season or less, it's kind of eye-opening. Offensive line's a great example. They're not the only position group where having someone who's been on campus for 2 or more seasons is a rarity. And I think it shows. So you have to be able to get better during the season. And here's the good news, BA. All the goals that Georgia has set at the beginning of the year are still right there in front of them.
That's right.
There isn't a world beater that I see out there. It will take improvement. Georgia will have to play better. But they are capable of that. There are teams that will have to play better that just can't. They don't have the horses in the stable. They don't have the roster that will allow it. Georgia does. We're not there yet. It's not something where you look out and watch them play on Saturday and say, yeah, this is a championship level team right now. But they're capable of it, and I think that's the reason for optimism.
I want to ask you about Auburn to finish up the conversation. I keep looking at the wrong camera. I want to ask you about Auburn to finish up the conversation. Let me squeeze in one more before we get there, though, as it relates to Saturday's game. I thought some of the stuff we got from Kirby on Gunner Stockton was really interesting in that, to me, you read between the lines, they do think that Gunner is capable of doing more than he's done thus far this year, turning it loose, making some throws, trusting himself, taking some risk. Smart used that word a couple of times in his post-game analysis of Gunner Stockton. And it seems like that Georgia's trying to create, I hate to say it this way, but a safe space so that Gunner can do some of that. I thought it was really candid from Kirby after the game about Gunner. And if he will just turn it loose a little bit more to go along with a running game that seems to be coming into full form, then I do think there is a chance this Georgia offense can get better before the season comes to a close. And by the time these really big games start taking place, what do you make of Kirby's evaluation of Gunner right now?
I think he knows his game. I think they've talked about it every week, probably behind the scenes in their meeting rooms and when they meet as coaches, trying to evaluate this offense and how they can get better. Gunner has done a phenomenal job of getting us out of some bad situations. There's a number of times where we're trying to dial up shots and there's unblocked defenders or guys coming off of blocks that he's created and checked down and move the ball into first down situations, either third down or get us some yardage that otherwise would have been losses because of his ability to move in the pocket. But there is meat left on the bone. And I think that's where we're looking at ways we can get better, ways Georgia can get better as a team offensively. And there's opportunity there. So I think it comes with the confidence. One, his teammates can help him there. That if you give him a clean pocket, he's probably going to feel a little more comfortable to work his way through the progression or stick with his primary read, that half click longer, or be able to pull the trigger. We haven't seen him kind of develop that trust with his wide receivers in those combated 50-50 balls, if you will. One, I don't think there's been a lot of opportunities that he's provided for them to earn that trust, but he's not the sole figure at fault when it comes to that. So as a team, they can get better. I think they want him to play with confidence and be able to rip it. I think we've seen at times he's capable of it, that he's got the arm strength. He's got the abilities to make those throws, but there's a hesitation, and we have certainly noted that in previous games where there's an opportunity. I think we see that he sees it, and he still doesn't pull the trigger. So I think being able to get him to the point where he's confident enough, I don't know whether it's in his game or this offense, that he sees those opportunity and seizes them, will be able to complement what they've done in the run game, and that's create an identity in that space. And I think he's well on his way to being able to lean into that, but also use it as a platform to kind of build into this aerial attack.
Let me say this as we wrap up here. We're obviously in a very different SEC than ever before, and there's so many big games and so much competition that traditional rivalries can get obscure. Georgia-Auburn's always meant a lot. John, you were a part of one of the historic wins for Georgia against Auburn in 2002. Of course, folks were on that team. Tell the story of your halftime speech that propelled Georgia from the deficit that allowed the Dawgs to win the East for the very first time in program history, going to the SEC championship for the first time, and then breaking a 20-year drought of winning the SEC championship. Of the Georgia-Auburn games, that's one that really stands out. So to set the stage for this week and what it's going to be, what does the Georgia-Auburn rivalry mean to you? What are your memories of what happened in that final game you played against him in 2002? And how do you conjure some of that for this weekend as well?
I think that rivalry means a lot to some old heads that we've experienced some of those battles. And, I don't know what the streak is now against Auburn, what our record is specifically under Coach Smart, but it's pretty lopsided. It's one-sided. And for some of these players, they probably don't know the history of the rivalry and Auburn. And I jokingly will say with frequency that Auburn's become a basketball school. Yeah. And it's a slight and a dig at them on purpose, because I know the battles that existed, whether it was in Jordan-Hare or in Sanford Stadium. It was always a heated rivalry. And I think there's aspects of that still exist. I think guys that come to be a part of this team, they recognize that there's something different about this rivalry. And I think that's also the beauty of playing at Georgia. We have so many rivals, whether it's Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, Georgia Tech. You work your way around the state. There's plenty of foes that we want to beat consistently and take that extra pride in. And I wonder if a little of that is lost on this generation of player just because it's been so one-sided and dominant. But for us that have experienced those battles where, it's multi-overtime games and hard-fought wins and a few losses along the way, what that rivalry means. You respect the tradition of it, and you always want to beat Auburn.
Of course, you're a modest person, but what is it like to have people still tell the story? Oh, yeah, Jon Stinchcomb stood up and spoke to the team, and we came back and got the win. I mean, that's a really nice thing to have said about you. I mean, what do you remember about that moment in particular?
Yeah, it's a quarter century ago, so it's been a while, but fond memories. I think, if anything, it was a testament to the close-knit nature of that locker room that I was a senior at the time. We had such great leaders, Boss Bailey, Tony Gilbert, George Foster. You go across the room and we just had great players that were willing to sacrifice for the guy next to them. And, we had talked about it all season. This is a special group. Terrence Edwards left him out. Don't know how. So I left out so many others.
Sure.
But we just had a great special group. And at that time, we knew we had to win that game to go to the SEC championship. Hadn't done it since the Herschel Walker era, and just recognized there was an opportunity for us to play better. And I think that's what leaders do. Sometimes they put it on their shoulders and say, hey, we're capable of more. We don't need the coaches to come in and share that with us. We already know it. So sometimes it's good to hear it from a brother, and it raises the focus level, and you recognize that there's a unique opportunity here, and we were able to come in that second half. And that's the Michael Johnson touchdown in the corner of the end zone. Great play by him, and really across the board. So those are fun ones because the tight-knit nature of that team, that we were close and we cared about each other. And I'm grateful that fans and those that were able to recall that story hold it fondly. I certainly do, and it was a great experience to be a part of, and I'm glad we ended up on top and end up going and beating the brakes off of Arkansas in the SEC championship and Florida State in the Sugar Bowl. So made for great memories and great opportunities for memories having cashed in against Auburn.
John, great stuff. Thanks for telling the story. We like going back and remembering stuff like that because those were fun ones for us, and we're hoping for another fun win for Georgia against Auburn coming up on Saturday. Appreciate your time. John, we'll look forward to doing it again with you very soon. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window in Dorf, Georgia.
Looking forward to it, BA. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, I'll tell you, a lot of folks saw that point spread for Saturday a little bit more narrow than they maybe have expected. Georgia, 3.5, 4 point, depending on where you saw it and when you saw it. And I will tell you, I wasn't surprised by that at all. I know Auburn's lost a couple of times already this season. I think that both road games at Oklahoma and at Texas A&M were at least competitive. Stat line not great for Auburn, admittedly. Gave up a lot of sacks to Oklahoma. Didn't really move it much against Texas A&M, but the final margin pretty competitive in two pretty hostile places to play. So I expect that Georgia will get Auburn's best shot on Saturday. And to be honest with you, I think it's going to be a close game. This is one of those for me that just got to try to find a way to win. Win by a skinny little point. Do whatever you have to do. If you do, you set yourself up for a massive home game coming up against Ole Miss after that. But in a very hostile environment, the kind of thing that Jon Stinchcomb once played in and other Georgia players throughout the years have played in, you just got to try to find a way to win that and just make something happen. So you better believe this week we're going to be talking a lot about Georgia does just that. I'll also give you this before we move on. This is not great news, but it does need to be reported. Jeff Sintel, I guess, story at DawgNation.com, that Georgia running back commit Jae Lamar is no longer with Colquitt County. We'll have to read the story at DawgNation.com to get the additional details on that. I believe that Lamar has missed some time with the Packers this season. And we'll let Jeff give you all the details about what all this means going forward. But obviously, if Lamar's status with his high school team is in question, then that would clearly put his status with Georgia in some question too. Seems fair to assume that. Now, there's always time for this stuff to work itself out and be figured out, but we'll take Jeff's reporting on this seriously. It's a story worth reading at DawgNation.com. Sounds like the immediate future in doubt for the Colquitt County running back and the Georgia commit, Jae Lamar. More on that at DawgNation.com. What information is available, I'm sure Jeff will have that, but it sounds like Lamar not with Colquitt County, according to some reporting there coming from Jeff. Now, happier note, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Let's get you ready for an amazing Royal Caribbean cruise vacation coming up at DawgNation in April. I was watching football yesterday, and they have the Utopia of the Seas commercials that are airing, and it gets me excited because I just love the ship. I love the fact, one of the proudest things for me is the fact that our DawgNation cruise has been able to take place on Utopia of the Seas, this newest in the Oasis class of ships. I think a huge step forward for cruising in general, because if you like those 3 and 4 night sailings, well, to have a ship like Utopia specially made for the shorter sailings for those who want that kind of cruise experience. It's just what Royal Caribbean is so good at. So Jessica Slater's a travel advisor, specially selected for us by Royal Caribbean. She books the DawgNation cruise. She takes care of everything you need. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. You want a great Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, you want to be on our DawgNation cruise on April, Jessica can tell you all about that. Hope that you will check her out today. She'll get you ready to go for Utopia of the Seas, for Star of the Seas, for Icon of the Seas, the brand new Legend of the Seas, all of the other great things that Royal Caribbean's got going on. She's got you ready for all of that. All right, let's go cruise around the SEC right now. Let's talk about some of the big games from the weekend. Let me start with Texas going to Florida and losing. Now, first of all, it was an absolute bloodbath for my picks this week. 2-4 overall, just got really, really bludgeoned. And boy, anytime you think, pride always comes before the fall. Pride gets punished. We believe that, very wholeheartedly. And I just thought some of these games were just going to be easy. Hey, Texas was not going to go lose at Florida. It may be close, but they're not going to lose the game. And yet they were never really in it when it comes to actually winning it. Florida, for the most part, dominated this one from pillar to post. And you got to talk both sides of this. Let me talk the Texas side first, then we'll talk the Florida side. On the Texas part of this, we've all gotten a little bit used to Texas being overrated. It's a big fan base. Media serves big fan bases. Media will embarrass itself trying to serve a big fan base. We see all that kind of stuff all the time. We've seen it before. I don't believe I've ever quite seen anything like this. The extent to which that Arch Manning may just be a total fraud. Like, he may just not be good. And I never would have imagined this. I never would have imagined he'd be this bad year 3, waiting his turn, finally get it. He just looks lost. There was the one shot of him on the sideline on Saturday sitting down. There was almost a carbon copy of the thing that Georgia fans always love to bring back of he and you are side by side. It's like the stereo version of, deer and headlights quarterbacks. Well, he had the same look on his face again on Saturday. Arch Manning is just really unimpressive, really unimpressive. And I talked to him at SEC Media Days, heard from him there. He came across as a likable guy, as a guy who was ready for this moment. I just think he may not have the skills, or at least he doesn't seem to possess them at the moment. And there's always a chance he gets better, and of course he'll still have a chance to show something against Georgia in November, and we don't certainly suggest that he won't be able to do that then. But you got to call this what it is. This is one of the most dramatic flops to begin the season that we have seen in recent college football history. Arch Manning was deified before the year began, and if they had another option, it's not even obvious that Arch should even finish the season for Texas based on the way that he's playing right now. Now, against Florida, he wasn't the only problem they had, but you had, and I'm not an Arch hater. I predicted Arch to be good. I thought that some of the skeptics were overstating things a bit. If anything, they weren't stating it loudly enough. Arch Manning is a gigantic flop. Texas as a team may be a fraud. It is amazing to see the number one team to begin the season now unranked after having lost twice already this season. Playoff hopes hanging by a thread with games against Oklahoma, Vandy, teams like that coming up that are not guaranteed wins for Texas. Obviously, John Mateer, though, not expected to play in Saturday's Red River Shootout game. Now, on the other side of this, the Florida part of this for a moment. They haven't quit on Billy Napier. That's the one thing you can say. They have not quit. Defensively, they are really good. And the most important thing that a Georgia fan needs to understand about this is when you watch the way that Florida plays against Texas, you are reminded that no matter what Florida's record is going into the cocktail party, and the game won't be in the swamp, and they won't get the extra juice from that, and I get that. But going into that cocktail party, Florida is a tough out for Georgia. And you can make a case that the last easy game, other than the Charlotte game or whoever it is that Georgia's playing, the last easy game that Georgia's going to play this year, it's already played. Kentucky may have been the easy game. Kentucky's probably the worst team in the SEC. But SEC-wise, the rest of the way, none of them are easy. Mississippi State on the road, not easy. Florida, not easy. Based on the way the Gators played against Texas, you got to say that. Georgia has a very challenging schedule coming up. So we do this thing off the top of the show or near the beginning of the show about, hey, just got to get better, find a way to survive, find a way to hang around. Just avoid the traps that some of these other teams have fallen into, and that's true. But on the other side, honesty compels you to admit, Georgia has an incredibly tough schedule coming up where it's going to be aggressively challenged every single week, including at Auburn on Saturday. And a game like Florida that you might think of as one of the easier games because the Gators' record has a chance to not be very good. Even that, you're not quite so sure how easy it is based on what they just did against Texas. Let's talk Alabama Vanderbilt here for a moment. With all due respect to Alabama, Alabama did what it needed to do on Saturday. Covered the spread, won the game. It was competitive. Alabama handled business. And the week after beating Georgia, that's enough. With all due respect, I think this story for me is really about Vanderbilt more so than it is about Alabama. Vanderbilt was very competitive in this game. Had the lead, until the very end, had a chance to win the game. Y'all, Vanderbilt is real. The dramatic improvement that Vanderbilt has seemingly undergone over the course of the last couple of years with obviously Diego Pavia quarterback, this is not an exaggeration. This is a team that right now is a threat to beat anyone. If you go into Tuscaloosa and you remain competitive for as long in this game as Vanderbilt did, there's really no game on the Vanderbilt schedule the rest of the season they could not win. I don't know what that means for them record-wise. Obviously, maintaining that week to week is not going to be any easier for them than it will be for anybody else. But this is not a joke. This is not a fun media creation, cute little story type thing. This is a real improved team that's doing a lot of stuff that we would have never imagined a Vanderbilt team being able to do. Competitive for the full 60 with Alabama in its own stadium. Pretty impressive. Let me mention Florida State losing to Miami. I don't have a problem with somebody saying right now that Miami looks to be the best team in college football. I would say that's true. We gave the number earlier. Even against soft ACC competition, still not likely to win out and go undefeated. This has been the problem for ACC teams like Miami in the past. Staying focused against the week-to-week dregs of the ACC, not always an easy thing. But Miami's been impressive. And going into Tallahassee and winning that game the way that it did was also impressive. So when you think about, okay, well, who has emerged and who has stepped to the forefront? You got to put Miami along with an Oregon. There are a small handful of teams that have done, Ohio State probably too. It's probably those three, right? Ohio State, Oregon, Miami, that have stepped up and stepped away from the competition more so than anybody else. And what Miami did at Florida State was worthy of impressive. It's worthy of some pats in the back. They played very well in that spot. And right now, Carson Beck is certainly a major part of the Heisman Trophy conversation. You would certainly imagine that. Let me squeeze in one more here finally. And I didn't see a ton of this game, I'm not going to lie to you. I was excited about getting home watching some football and for the Georgia game. And you know how you do sometimes. I just went on the back porch, got the TV on. I'm going to settle in and I'm going to watch it. Boom, my head hit that couch and I was out. So I didn't see a ton of the A&M Mississippi State game, but A&M seems to have done what it needed to do here too. And talk about a reversal of fortune. I've told y'all a million times. I've been as wrong on A&M this year as almost anybody because I was pretty skeptical of them to begin the season. I thought last year, they hate Texas, had the game in College Station, could not win it, saw Texas come into their league and have a lot more success than A&M was having. I thought the morale for Texas A&M was really low. Think about how that's changed now. All of a sudden, it's Texas that, at least for now, is struggling. A&M is winning games. A&M is undefeated. It got a high ranking, more opportunities to come here. Isn't it interesting that, at least for the moment, the arrow is pointing up for A&M in a way that it's not for Texas? And suddenly the morale that I thought at the beginning of the season was pretty low for the Aggies overall, maybe that's not the case. We've always believed Mike Elko to be a good coach. We weren't quite so sure how well that good coaching translated to the team last year, but Elko won games at Duke. He's a good coach. And it seems to be really paying off. And defensively, they are really good, especially up front defensively, which is where you expect a Mike Elko coach team to be good. Really good up front defensively. A&M, long way from here. We don't think about them a lot. Georgia, obviously, as you know, plays them rarely. But this is a real factor in the SEC here at the moment. So credit to them for getting a win against Mississippi State in Kyle Field on Saturday will make that. Cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, before we wrap up here today, I mentioned this a moment ago that obviously there are big games left to come from Georgia, and Georgia needs every edge it can get. That's true for all of the SEC slate, but it's also going to be true for the regular season finale as well. It's a Black Friday afternoon. We always think of it as clean old-fashioned hate. Obviously, it's got a different moniker here this year, but the point is you can get into Mercedes-Benz Stadium, represent Georgia as you should be. Maybe one of your best chances to get tickets for this big game, or for some of the big games for Georgia, is through Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the game against Georgia Tech. So if you go to mercedes-benzstadium.com/events, you can jump in and be there and be a part of this. It was a thrilling game a year ago. Obviously, Tech is fired up for this game, but they also made the decision to put their home game in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which creates a much bigger opportunity for Georgia fans to be there too. So we need you there. It's mercedes-benzstadium.com/events to get your tickets for Georgia Tech Black Friday afternoon in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We'll see you there for it. We need as many Georgia fans as we can get. mercedes-benzstadium.com/events for more on that. And, of course, one of the things we've come to understand is that DawgNation spreads far and wide. You literally see Georgia fans everywhere you go, no matter where you go. That's what our Golden Shoe celebrates here today. Alex Nader writing in, "Hey, BA, I travel a lot. I'm in the aviation industry, and I love the fact that no matter where I go, I meet some dog fans. Ran into this dog fan in Bridgeport, West Virginia. Had a great time talking about our dogs. First of all, you love the Georgia ink there. That's a cool thing to be able to see. Great-looking tattoo. And a couple of Georgia fans just hanging out and having a good time. Way out in West Virginia. That's an awesome thing to see. I love that. I love the friendships and the relationships that get forged because of our connection to Georgia football. Win or lose, that's always a lot of fun and a well-earned Golden Shoe going out there on that. Lousy, stinking Gators. They may have won on Saturday against Texas, but it doesn't come quite so easy for them against Georgia. How about 1,794 days? That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. It's our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We're back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We will look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that today. Okay, let's get some comments. We'll find out what's on your mind. We'll kind of bounce through here and talk about anything you want to do. Kenneth Holt says, if Georgia and A&M both went out, who's playing Bama in the SEC title game? How does that work if they don't play? So, okay, here's what's important to know, is that, yeah, I know Alabama beat Georgia, but there's no guarantee that Alabama is one of the two best teams in the SEC. We are a long way towards determining any of that. We are. And keep in mind, Texas got its second loss, but only one of those is an SEC loss. And this is the problem with the 8-game schedule is you don't have, and by the way, the other leagues have an issue with this too, where, there's a chance that Miami, Virginia, and Georgia Tech could all go 8-0. They don't play each other. So you could have 3 8-0 teams in league play in the ACC. The SEC tiebreakers are a total mess. So it's still way too early to determine any of this. There are a lot of losses coming. I hope it's not to Georgia, but I think Saturday's going to be a knockdown, drag out, and Saturday's not any easier than any game Georgia will play coming up after that. So it's just way too early to know. On paper, so far this year, the best team in the SEC has actually been Ole Miss. And that's who Georgia gets to play. And that's one of the reasons why, if you can just do what you need to do against Auburn and win it somehow, some way, I don't care what the story is. I don't care what the margin is. Do not care. Find a way to win. You set up another big home game coming against Ole Miss where you could restore some of your own panache and prestige. But, the notion that Alabama, because it beat Georgia, is now one of the two best teams in the SEC and an inside track on the SEC championship, I don't necessarily see it that way at all. Y'all, much the same way that Georgia's only a 4-point favorite, 3.5-point favorite at Auburn, Bama's only like a 4-point favorite at Missouri on Saturday. Missouri's a team that's capable of beating Alabama. That was a blowout last year, but Missouri is absolutely a team capable of being very competitive with Alabama on this particular Saturday. Tyler Puglisi says, hey, some food for thought. What if Georgia still had Carson Beck with this receiving core? I love Gunner. Glad we have him, but I'd rather just makes me wonder what our passing game would be like. I think it's fair to wonder, would Georgia be throwing it better? This is one of those things where it's always a little bit difficult to dissect exactly what happened a year ago. And no one answer is completely right. For instance, Gunner was great, but Carson was great, but he got upended because of all the drops. Well, the drops did hurt him, but Carson also had some issues last year that were of his own doing too. That both those things were true. Carson was running for his life because of some offensive line struggles last year. That's true too. But Carson Beck didn't always help that situation as much as he probably could have either. All of that is true, simultaneously true. There wasn't one reason for why Georgia struggled in 2024. There were several overlapping reasons, and I think that Beck does have to own some of that himself too. I think he's trying to rehabilitate his image in some of the interviews that he's done recently, and I understand why he is. I think he probably needs to reintroduce himself to NFL draft scouts. I get that. But would Georgia's passing attack be better if Beck was here and playing in place of Gunner Stockton? Well, the numbers that we gave a little earlier that some folks have put out online, their numbers actually a little bit more comparable than maybe people realize. Daniel Denny thinks that the spread should be higher for Georgia and Auburn. Yeah, I really don't see it. I don't see it. Even at 3.5 and 4, I'm certainly not a guarantee to take Georgia minus that number right now. I don't. I actually think on the road in a hostile environment, as hostile as what Neyland Stadium was, being favored by more than a field goal is actually a little bit bigger spread than you probably realize. Scott Pete also says that Carson's more of a pocket passer, and with what Georgia has now, the more mobile Stockton's probably better for Georgia, I mean to say. There's a school of thought in which that's probably smart too. Elite GB says Georgia's well in the race for a trophy. Some of y'all watch too much TV and TikTok. I think it's inarguably true that Georgia is still very much a national championship contender. I think that's true. What I don't know that it's true is that we can say with certainty that Georgia will be there for the full season. Georgia might win the national championship. They may be eliminated by playoff contention before the next bye. I mean, it's all in play for Georgia. And I just think it's really important for me to say that. They may not lose again. They may lose twice before the end of October. I think it really is all in play for Georgia. And some of this is going to be determined by what they do week to week in these games. In other words, there have certainly been Georgia seasons where I think we had a lot more certainty about what we might get from Georgia. But this particular season, I don't know that we've got great certainty about what we're getting from any team around college football. Savannah Bryan says he was surprised it wasn't a pick'em game between Georgia and Auburn. Yeah, I mean, I think to actually make Georgia, in excess of a field goal favorite in an incredibly hostile environment for a team that began the season ranked, I think that's actually a decent amount of respect for Georgia. UGA Marino also mentioning the element of the gunner legs, and it's one of the reasons why Marine and others, it's one of the reasons why I hope that the legs remain a part of the Georgia offense every game moving forward. And yeah, I know, and Kirby Smart said this, we played the clip for you, got to make sure he doesn't get too hurt, you got to make sure he doesn't take too many shots. But boy, a Georgia offense that doesn't include gunner running is just not nearly as good as it needs to be. Garrison Tucker says, if you're Auburn, what's your game plan for Saturday? Well, I think for them, it comes down to a couple of things. A, they've had some offensive line issues. They've not run it particularly well. So I think some of Auburn is about, can we fix some of our problems? That's what Auburn's probably saying. They give up 10 sacks to Oklahoma. have not run it really against anybody. Had some issues with that against Texas A&M. Jackson Arnold, I thought Arnold would be far better. He's turned out to be. There is a part of me that wonders coming off a bye, and this is just reckless, rampant speculation. But there's a part of me that wonders, would they at least consider playing Deuce Knight in this game? The hotshot freshman, would they at least consider playing him, whether it's break glass in case of emergency or you go in with a package for him? I mean, they've got to be a little bit more dynamic offensively, and it certainly seems like Jackson Arnold's just not going to provide that. Now, Hugh Freeze has found a way to get running yards with the quarterback 2 years in a row against Georgia, so maybe you'll have something for Jackson Arnold with that on Saturday too. But if I'm at least on guard for the possibility they might get their backup quarterback Deuce Knight involved in the game. Yeah, Senior Dog 54 mentioning that, Auburn has had the running quarterback in the Hugh Freeze era, get some yards against Georgia, and Arnold can at least run around, so maybe they'll do that. DT says he's frustrated that Gunner's not running more. I like what he did on Saturday. I think that, as long as that is in every game moving forward, I think that gives Georgia a real chance. Let's see what else. Bill Camacho says he's got the Dogs squeaking by in the game, 24-23. Yeah, I could see it being real close like that. I could see it being a last-second field goal type game. I really could. I really could. Doggy says that Beck hasn't played UT or Bama this season, teams that Georgia has played, and it's true. Although, in fairness, they did just beat a team that beat Alabama, so you got to give them credit for that. And this is one of those things where I don't mind being honest and hope that people can appreciate my honesty. I'm a Georgia fan that does a pro-Georgia show. I don't hate everything about Carson Beck, or, I'm not the thing that people always say online, living rent-free in head and whatever else. That's not the case for me at all. But as a Georgia fan doing a pro-Georgia show, it would be better for Georgia if Beck wasn't great. It just would. PR narratives, things like that. It would be better for Georgia if Beck wasn't great. So there's a instinctive part of me that kind of hopes Miami loses, kind of hopes Beck doesn't win the Heisman. It would be better for Georgia if that wasn't the case. I do have to admit that. That doesn't mean I'm sitting at home like, we call them like those voodoo dolls, things like that. Honestly, I live a rich and full life. When I'm at home, I'm not thinking about Carson Beck. But if forced to consider it, it'd be better for me if Beck wasn't very good. Ken Holcomb says, had you rather play Texas or Vandy this season? And listen, I get the question, man. I don't think there's any doubt that Vanderbilt has played better this season than Texas has. And there's no doubt that Diego Pavia has played a lot better than Arch Manning has. I get it. I think that's it's a great hot take type thing, and I don't think you're far off. I really don't. DT says, my voice sounds better. I appreciate it. So I went to the doctor on Friday. I will tell you, I did not get quite as positive of an update on Friday as I got from a previous doctor visit. I'm trying to go to a lot of different people, hear a lot of different opinions, because this is my livelihood. I don't have a marketable skill other than my voice. My voice is getting a little bit better, but it may not get fully back better on its own. I may have to have a little procedure or something. I'm trying to avoid that, but I may just have to. I don't know. But I appreciate you saying that, DT. Thank you. Let me see if I can get some Facebook comments here. We're going to do like 5 more minutes worth of comments, and we're getting ready to bounce out. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Chris, on the subject of Gunner Stockton, yeah, like I said, I think you read between the lines on what Kirby Smart said. I think they want a little bit more from Gunner than they've got. I think Gunner's done some things, some good things. sometimes it's a little bit hard to recognize the throw that wasn't made. You can judge the results of a throw that was made, either it was successful or it wasn't, but you can't judge what you could have gotten if you made the throw you could have made. And I do get the sense that Georgia thinks there are more throws that Gunner Stockton could have made. And I do think that Kirby was kind enough to share some of that with us after the game. Doesn't have to. He's not under an obligation to, but he did, which I think is nice. Let's see what else. Johnny Prescott asking about Chauncey Bowens. I got to tell you, man, I think that Bowens is turning out to be a real find. I really do. And the fact that his successful runs against Alabama were followed up by successful runs also against Kentucky, I think that's a real thing. I think listen, we've changed our mind about this 1,000 times. But for now, I think that Chauncey Bowens looks like Georgia's best running back. He started on Saturday. I'm guessing he'll start the Auburn game, and I think the Bowens is just good. Bowens is finding daylight and running to the outside and breaking 10-plus yard gains in a way that we have not seen Georgia running backs do nearly as much. But Bowens is doing a lot of that. Georgia's very, very, I want to say lucky to have him, but it's fortunate that they do have him for sure. As far as the Jae Lamar thing goes, I reserve judgment on most of that. Not quite so sure what it all means, but as I guess Jeff is reporting, Lamar is not with Colquitt County. That would certainly call his status as a Georgia commit into question, I got to think. It was a very emotional commitment ceremony when committed to Georgia, and Lamar talked about the challenges that kept him away from football for a couple of years. He's been through a lot, and it's one of the things I really like about football. I think that football is a change agent. I think that football makes men. I think you're better off for your association with football. I really do. I think it makes you a better man than you otherwise would have been. In some cases, makes you into a true man when you might not have fully experienced that. Football is a really powerful thing. And it certainly seemed like the success story for Jae Lamar I thought it was so emotional the way that he told that story. And he was willing to be emotional during that commitment ceremony. I don't know what has caused him not to be a part of with his Colquitt County teammates right now, but significant enough that it is being reported now on the record. So all we can do is pray for Jay and hope the best for him. And obviously, I think you've seen some recent rumblings with Georgia. I think they're still in the market for other running backs, and I think they'll consider to do some of that. DMart42 in the case of Daniel Harris. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Harris. Obviously, he's not playing very much at cornerback right now, but I don't know that it has to be anything other than guys like Ellis Robinson, who seemed to have a pretty good game on Saturday, DeMello Jones, who's got some ability. It seems like they're just ahead of Harris right now, fairly or not, for whatever reason. Seems to be the case. Georgia also is playing, I think, did we see 3 cornerbacks in the game, some for Georgia? I think they're going to maybe try to play some dime a little bit more because of the matchup opportunities it gives them, taking advantage of what they think is their coverage strengths maybe. But it could be, we knew there was a chance this could happen. It could be that just both of the younger corners, Ellis and Harris, are just ahead of him right now. Maybe that's the case. Jonathan Aaron says, do you feel like that playing at Auburn is just haunted where strange things happen? Boy, it's one of the things that makes the rivalry special, Jonathan. A lot of strange things have happened in that series. You're right about that for sure. Miriam and Kathy Aquaviva talking about Texas still being favored over Oklahoma. Well, keep in mind, John Mateer's not playing. And look, the odds makers are going to change their minds slowest of all. We see something, and, even if I'm trying to be astute with my analysis, there's still this moment in which the kind of hot take thing kicks in, and you're like, oh, Texas is a fraud, done with Texas, whatever. Odds makers just change their mind slowly. It's one of the reasons why, even if you never place a bet, even if you're morally opposed to betting, which some people are, even if you will never place a bet, don't think people should bet, it's still interesting to consider the point spreads, because point spreads are a slower reaction to current events than the regular conversation is. Oh my gosh, can you believe how bad Texas is? That's what we say in our knee-jerk reaction. Point spread says things still haven't changed that much just yet. Texas played badly, but week to week, you don't often see the same level of play replicate itself, that eventually Texas gravitates more back to some version of what we thought it was before the start of the season. So the point spreads, I believe, are a good check on whatever common opinion has to be in a given situation. People think that Georgia's way better than Auburn. Actually, they're not that big of a favorite. People think that Alabama's riding high. Small favorite at Missouri. Be careful there. Texas just lost. Oklahoma's looking really good. Backup quarterback's playing. Let's don't give up on Texas just yet. Texas is a favorite. That's one of the things I think that makes the college ball conversation more fun, is the way in which whatever conventional wisdom might be just gets confounded. Wayne Kirkland says the biggest difference between Frazier and Bowens is yards after contact. He says Bowens just doesn't go down. He really doesn't. I also think that Bowens, in addition to shaking off arm tackles, things like that, I just think he's running to daylight better. With all due respect, that has been a little bit of a problem for Georgia running backs now for multiple years. But I think that Bowens is doing a pretty good job of just running to daylight. Brian Whitaker asking if Roderick Robinson's still hurt. I think officially what they'll tell you is he's been battling a hamstring injury and also coming off just a really, really serious injury from a year ago. But at the same time, I do think there is a pecking order. You know, hierarchies sometimes feel impolite, but football teams function best with a hierarchy. And Roderick Robinson's just not at the running back, on the top of the running back hierarchy for Georgia. Whether it's the lingering injury from a year ago with a hamstring that supposedly kept him out, whatever, or if it's just a coach's decision, which it very well might be. Robinson is just not near the top of the running back hierarchy for Georgia. Let's get a couple more. Isha Murphy says, my wife and I had a great time Saturday. It was great to see you and be on the show in person in Athens. He says, I think I spent a little too much money at the bookstore. Listen, that's an easy place to want to spend a lot of money because of all the good-looking UGA apparel. But Isha, I was glad you came by. It was great to see you. All right. Ken Holcomb says he was happy to see Ellis Robinson step up on Saturday. I was too. Ralph Price, thank you for the kind words, who says he's praying for me. Listen, I'll tell you this, and I don't want to be too serious, and I don't want to, I don't talk about myself a ton, but I will tell you, man, the issue that I've had with my voice has been a little bit of a crisis of, I don't want to say crisis of faith. That's overstating it. Whatever a softer way of saying the same thing would be the better way to say it, because your whole personality is wrapped up in talking. I mean, that's what I do. I talk. And when you don't have that, it causes you to really rethink some things about, am I using my voice for all the best reasons I could be using it? That. Also, what am I other than my ability to do the show and to call high school games and to do the broadcast stuff that I love to do? Is that the only value I bring to the world? I know that sounds like really weird and kind of morbid. I'm just telling you right now, man, in terms of the emotional impact on me, this is one of the biggest things I've dealt with in a little while. It really is. It really is. It's had a big impact on me. It has. So my reason for saying that is because I am willingly accepting all prayers. So thank you very much, Ralph. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Johnny Prescott asking about the Georgia Southern commit that scored all those touchdowns. The Sequoia running backs, who I think you're thinking about, and I'm sorry for not remembering his name, but running back from Sequoia has had a monster year statistically, including one huge game. That's who you're thinking about. He goes to Sequoia. All right, let's just do a couple of final comments here on YouTube, then we're going to go. Will Rejecki, thank you very much. Will Rejecki. Thank you very much, Jay Black. Al Chandler says the defensive secondary is somewhat improved, but still has room for improvement. It was, if I was an opposing team, that's where I would target is. Yeah, I mean, the problem is that when you line up as a defensive back and have to cover over and over and over again, especially with these teams now that spread you out and they run, all these routes. I mean, your batting average, no one's going to bat 1,000 on that. It's one of the reasons why you have to have pass rush. is because, we see this a lot where there's a blown coverage or there's a guy that gets a step on somebody else or just a good route. But if the pass rush is there, all of a sudden the team can't take advantage of the open receiver because the quarterback's timing is just hurried. Pass rush erases mistakes. That's one of the reasons why Georgia's going to get that going. Bulldog Big E says that Gunner will not be an NFL quarterback. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's too early to know on that. As I said, I think that Georgia wants a little more from Gunner than what it's gotten. But I do think that Gunner is also giving Georgia a little bit more than people realize. And I'm really not trying to talk out of both sides of my mouth. I do think, though, in situations like that, there is conflicting evidence about exactly what kind of season that Gunner really has had to this point. I think he's been better than some people realize. All right, final comments at DawgNation.com, then we're going to go. Matt Rukavina in here today. Love to see him checking in. He says he has to sneak past the work VPN, so some of y'all get creative about how you get to the show. But Matt, I'm glad you're here. I appreciate that. Savannah Bryan says, "Will it be an easier game for Georgia, Charlotte, or Texas?" So the criticism of Texas is in full form right here, right now. Savannah Bryan also mentioning that for the most part, Tech plays a fairly manageable ACC schedule for a while. I think that's the case. Yeah, so good stuff. We are going to leave it there for today. And y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price promise. You can trust them on that. Water heater goes out, plumbing emergency. The RS stands for rapid service. That means if you find yourself in a tough spot because of something related to your plumbing, such as your water heater, let the folks at RS Andrews put a smile on your face quickly. They can do it for you in many cases the same day. So find them online at rsandrews.com for more on that. That is rsandrews.com. Also, full attention on Auburn starting tomorrow. Big rivalry, Deep South's oldest. We're on it from every angle. We'll see you then for it. It's DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We will look forward to talking to you then.